In Paris, May 29, 1913, a brand new ballet, Igor Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring, just began its premiere at the luxurious Theatre des Champs-Élysées. The place was packed with Parisian high society in tuxedos and gowns, expecting an elegant evening of art. But, minutes into the performance, the theater erupted into an explosive chaos. Laughter broke out, then boos, shouts echoed, fists were flying in the balconies, chairs scraped and crashed. It was a full-on riot, not exactly your typical night at the opera. The legendary story goes that the music and dance were so shocking that the suited patrons lost their minds. But was it really just the strange music that set people off? Or was there something deeper? Maybe something below the surface, fueling the fire? Today, we will explore the riot at the Rite of Spring's premiere, why the audience reacted in this way, and we will uncover the real reason of the Rite's riot. To understand why or how a ballet could even cause a brawl, we need to know what was simmering under the surface in Paris. On the eve of World War I, Parisian society was split between those with wealth and those with none. The working class majority lived in chronic poverty. A survey at the time suggested a family needed about 1 franc a day to survive, yet over half of the working class households failed to earn even that much. They toiled long hours and tough jobs only to come home to cramped rooms and contaminated water. Meanwhile, the wealthy elite were enjoying the high life with comfortable homes, fine food, and new gadgets, while half the other city struggled to even eat. It's a small wonder why the working class was growing resentful. They had little political power, while the rich called the shots. By 1913, Paris was a social powder keg, 2 classes living in different worlds, loathing each other. The stage was perfectly set for a clash of cultures. And indeed, culture, especially art and music, became a battleground for these class differences. The rich and poor wanted very different things from art. On one side, you had the particular high culture patrons of Paris. These folks were more used to graceful ballets and familiar harmonies of romantic music. The rich enjoyed flashy entertainment and exclusive artsy happenings, all in line with their elite tastes. Years of private art salons, posh parties, and expensive theater tickets had shaped their expectations. By 1913, the upper crust had a pretty rigid idea of what good art was. Beautiful, orderly, and classy. They came to the premiere expecting exactly that. Meanwhile, the working classes and bohemian types were craving something else entirely. They lived the gritty reality of modern Paris, so art that was too polished or stuck in the old ways might not have spoken to them. Many ordinary people were fed up with the status quo. Some were embracing new, adventurous art forms when they could afford to experience them, or at least were curious about anything that might shake up the elite. They didn't have all the fancy cultural privileges, so when a groundbreaking performance came along, it could be received as a rebellion against the elite's rules. As we'll see, the Rite of Spring would become just that kind of flashpoint, a piece of art that split the audience along the class lines. Now, if you want to know the full story of the riot at the premiere of the Rite of Spring, make sure to check out Classics Explains video on what happened that evening, which I will link in the bio. But for now, let me debrief on what went down. From the very first notes, it was clear this wasn't going to be a cozy melodic ballet. A lone bassoon played an unnaturally high register, producing an eerie primitive sound that filled the air. The audience shifted in their seats, unsure of what to make of it. Then the music grew into a hammering, jarring chord as the curtain rose. The dancers appeared not in tutus and tiaras, but in primitive Slavic peasant costumes. One eyewitness recalled that the piece shattered every convention of classical ballet, replacing graceful leaps with harsh, angular gestures. At first, there was nervous laughter. The aristocrats in the crowd giggled at the primitive spectacle, perhaps thinking it was some kind of joke. But their amusement quickly turned into irritation. The dissonant music and chaotic dance just wouldn't stop. For the wealthy patrons, used to feeling in control, this was almost an affront. The Rite of Spring mocked everything the upper class believed art to be. Boos and catcalls started raining from the boxes. Someone shouted that the performance was an outrage. Another yelled for the dancers to get off. But not everyone in the theater hated it. In fact, a number of people actually loved what they heard. To them, Stravinsky's wild ballet was thrilling, a break from stuffy tradition. It was like an artistic anarchy, and they were here for it. As the wealthy attendees began booing, the other viewers started shushing and shouting back in defense of the performance. The upper-class patrons suddenly found themselves being heckled by their social inferiors, right as they sat in their VIP theater boxes. Soon, the disturbance escalated beyond just yelling. Shouts and retorts volleyed back and forth between the fancy balconies and the cheap seats. Punches were likely thrown and objects possibly were tossed at the stage. Accounts vary. It got so out of hand that the police arrived, either to break up the fights or at least threaten to haul the worst offenders out. According to one report, at least one person was challenged to a duel that night. And by the time the final sacrificial dance on stage concluded, the audience had practically enacted their own primitive battle on the aisles. In the days after the premiere, the story of the ballet Riot spread and took on a life of its own. It became one of the most famous scandals in art history. One of the biggest takeaways from the whole Rite of Spring saga is what it tells us about art and society. This wasn't the first or last time music caused an uproar. It's just a really dramatic example. As empires and aristocracies fell from power, public unrest grew from the burgeoning women's and workers' movements. This turmoil and ferment spilled over into the arts. In other words, art doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's tied to the world around it. Each era's music, if you listen closely, echoes the social, economic, and cultural tensions of its time. The wild energy of the Rite of Spring was the sound of a society on the brink of change. You could literally hear the friction between the old world and the new in those aggressive rhythms and dissonant harmonies. In the famous Riot, people weren't only arguing about the ballet, they were arguing about their world. Every era has its own noise, its own art that mirrors the struggle of its time. In 1913 Paris, people heard it loud and clear, and they responded with their own voices, and yes, also their fists. So next time you hear a piece of music that really rattles you, maybe look deeper into it. That's the real legacy of the Rite's Riot. It reminds us that music isn't just about the notes and rhythm, it's a reflection of us. And sometimes, that reflection is explosive.